And I've auditioned for a lot and haven't got a lot. And then Gran Torino came around.
Scott Eastwood's life has always been more complicated than most fans realize. While the world knew him as Clint Eastwood's son, he spent years carving out his own path in a world that seemed determined to keep him invisible. Behind the Hollywood lights, there were family secrets, near impossible challenges, and personal tragedies that could break anyone. But Scott survived. He faced doors that refused to open, lessons harsher than any movie set, and moments that would leave most speechless. Today, we're uncovering the side of Scott Eastwood nobody talks about, the struggles, the shocking events, and the truths that shaped the man he is today. Stick around, because some of these revelations are almost impossible to believe.
Eastwood, we're here for the longest ride, out in theaters, April 10th.
Scott Eastwood is a household name now, but when he was born, his connection to one of Hollywood's biggest stars was kept completely under wraps. For years, he wasn't Scott Eastwood at all, but Scott Reeves, the son of a woman the world had never heard of, and a father whose name wasn't even written on his birth certificate. To really understand why that happened, you've got to know the kind of life Clint Eastwood lived in the mid-1980s. By that point, Clint Eastwood wasn't just successful, he was everywhere. After becoming a familiar face on Rawhide, then exploding worldwide with Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns, he cemented his tough guy reputation with Dirty Harry. By the late 1970s and 1980s, he was more than a movie star. He was directing, producing, and carefully controlling a public image built on honesty, loyalty, and old-school values. A big part of that image came from his long-term relationship with actress Sandra Locke. They lived together, starred in 6 movies together, and were treated by the media as Hollywood's most surprising love story. Locke even said Clint once sang to her, joking that she was the woman who finally made him faithful. To outsiders, it looked like the bad boy had finally settled down. In reality, Clint was keeping a secret so big it nearly blew up his entire public life. Around 1985, while still living with Sandra Locke, Clint began quietly seeing a flight attendant named Jocelyn Reeves. Unlike Locke, Reeves had nothing to do with the entertainment industry. Their relationship stayed completely hidden, not just from fans, but from Sandra herself, who later insisted she had no idea Clint was seeing anyone else. Together, Clint and Jocelyn had 2 children, a daughter named Catherine and a son, Scott, who would eventually take his father's last name and build his own acting career. While Clint was winning awards and smiling for cameras, he was also quietly supporting this second family, visiting occasionally, helping financially, but never publicly acknowledging them. To make matters more complicated, Sandra Locke believed their relationship was exclusive. She remained legally married to a close friend, an arrangement she described as non-romantic, but emotionally, she viewed Clint as her true partner. During their time together, she became pregnant twice and ended both pregnancies. She later claimed Clint pressured her into those decisions, though he denied it. Regardless of who knew what, one fact is now crystal clear. While Locke believed she was Clint's only partner, Clint was already laying the foundation of a second household miles away, one that would stay hidden for much of Scott's childhood.
Please don't make me sorry I told you. You make me afraid to believe you.
I never want to make you sorry.
On March 21, 1986, in the quiet California town of Carmel, Jocelyn Reeves gave birth to Scott Clinton Reeves. His middle name was a direct nod to his real father, Clint Eastwood. But the birth certificate told a colder, deliberate story. In the box where father's name should have been typed, the space was left completely blank. 2 years later, when Scott's sister Catherine was born, the same thing happened. Officially, at least on paper, both children had no father. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a decision made to hide 2 lives. This wasn't just kept from the public, it was kept from Sandra Locke too. Clint Eastwood chose to completely delete himself from his children's earliest records. The birth certificates were the first step in a long campaign of secrecy. The affair, the pregnancy, the children, none of it appeared in any magazine or gossip column until a tabloid story exploded everything wide open in 1990. By then, the damage was done. Scott had already spent his most formative years living outside his father's world. Scott's childhood was the polar opposite of anything you'd expect for Clint Eastwood's son. Under the name Scott Reeves, he grew up quietly with his mom, splitting time between Carmel and Hawaii. There were no movie premieres, no bodyguards, no family vacations on yachts. It was bikes, beaches, fishing poles, surfing, homework, and chores. From the outside, he looked like a regular kid with a single mom. Because in every practical sense, that's exactly what he was. But small towns have long memories, and whispers still traveled. Scott later admitted he knew who his father was from a young age. Imagine what that must feel like. Watching your real dad on television while knowing he's chosen not to publicly claim you. Seeing his face on posters for Dirty Harry and the outlaw Josie Wales, while your legal documents insist you are fatherless. Other children had family photos and Father's Day cards. Scott had a man who existed everywhere except next to him. According to both men, Clint occasionally visited and provided financial support. But these visits were quiet and private, often far from prying eyes. There were no red carpet moments or public acknowledgments of paternity. Instead, Scott lived with a strange emotional double exposure. He had a dad who was everywhere, on television screens, in newspapers, dominating culture, and yet completely absent in any official part of his life. Clint would later reflect on those years by saying, "I didn't get a chance to see him because I had a hot career going." From his side, Scott has often explained it with a blend of acceptance and emotional shrug, saying he was gone. He was doing his thing, but he was there too. That one sentence, "he was gone, but he was there," perfectly captures the invisible tug of war that shaped Scott's entire childhood. He wasn't exactly abandoned, but he wasn't included either. His childhood was defined by that contradiction, a father who was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. This boy, Scott Reeves, was a living secret, and it would take a massive public fight for that to change.
Everybody in the beginning said, you have to be careful working with an animal because they're so unpredictable. And
by 1989, Clint Eastwood's double life came crashing into public view, and it wasn't revealed by choice. It happened because his longtime girlfriend, Sandra Locke, caught him off guard at the worst possible moment. While Locke was away directing a film, Clint changed the locks on the home they shared and put all of her belongings into storage. That cold move triggered a brutal breakup, and Locke responded with a legal hammer. A palimony lawsuit claiming 14 years of partnership and betrayal. In that courtroom battle, every part of Clint's private world was suddenly open to inspection, including the secret he had guarded most fiercely, his second family with Jocelyn Reeves. Under oath, documents confirmed what Locke claimed she had never known, that while they were making movies together and sharing a home, Clint had fathered 2 children, Scott and Catherine, with another woman. Sandra, who had called their relationship exclusive, was devastated and publicly humiliated. The media jumped on the story. Fans were stunned. The press latched onto a headline they couldn't resist: Dirty Harry's dirtiest secret. To get Locke to drop the lawsuit, Clint agreed to set up a development deal for her at Warner Brothers worth $1.5 million. It was, on paper, a generous olive branch. She would get to direct and produce her own feature films under the studio's banner. But what happened next only added more fuel to the scandal. Over the next few years, Locke pitched more than 30 different movie ideas. Warner Brothers rejected every single one. Later, Locke discovered that Clint had privately agreed to reimburse the studio for the entire cost of her contract, meaning Warner Brothers had zero financial reason to ever greenlight her films. Feeling tricked, Locke sued Clint again in 1995, this time accusing him of fraud and intentional career sabotage. The lawsuit took their private pain and aired it loudly in a public courtroom. Jurors admitted afterward that it looked like she was going to win. Instead, Clint quietly settled out of court in 1996 for an undisclosed, but rumored to be significant, amount. By then, his image had taken a serious beating. The myth of the honorable cowboy, the no-nonsense man of quiet integrity, had cracked wide open. And caught right in the middle of this media storm were two children who had done nothing wrong. Scott and Catherine were thrust overnight from quiet childhoods in Hawaii into tabloid chaos. Their names were suddenly splashed across newspapers and entertainment shows. They weren't just kids anymore. They were proof of Clint's betrayal. Once the secret was out and his father's double life was splashed all over the headlines, Scott's world changed in ways most teenagers could never imagine. He was no longer just Scott Reeves from Hawaii. He was suddenly Scott Eastwood, son of a Hollywood icon, whether he liked it or not. Instead of running from it, Scott made a bold decision. While still a teenager, he left the laid-back islands to move in with Clint Eastwood in California. For the first time, he was going to actually live with his dad, a man he had only really known in bits and pieces.
I did until I pissed him off, yeah.
Yeah?
If he pictured a warm reunion complete with makeup hugs and overdue father-son bonding, he was wildly mistaken. Clint Eastwood didn't parent with soft edges. He came with a strict set of rules forged from pure old-school ideology. No handouts, no special treatment. If Scott wanted to be part of this household, he'd live by Clint's code. Scott has since repeated the same line in dozens of interviews. "My dad never gave me a cent. He made me work for everything." When Scott asked for a loan to buy a used truck so he could get to his part-time jobs, Clint flatly refused, not because he couldn't afford it, obviously, but because he believed Scott should earn it himself. That philosophy wasn't just financial, it was personal. Scott once told a story about sneaking off with some girls at a party and leaving his younger sister Catherine behind. When Clint found out, he didn't ground him. He punched him in the face, one solid shot, no lecture, no negotiation, just a blunt reminder that choices have consequences. It wasn't parenting most people would call gentle, but it was the Eastwood way. Accountability above all. Naturally, when Scott said he wanted to act, just like his dad, Clint didn't roll out a red carpet. Scott started auditioning using his mom's last name, Reeves, purposely hiding who he was. He worked as a bartender, valeted cars, carried lumber on construction sites, and crashed on friends' couches, all while chasing bit parts in commercials and low-budget films. The real test came when he began auditioning for his father's movies. Scott tried out for every single one, $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino, American Sniper, and didn't make the cut. His own father rejected him over and over, not because Clint wanted to be cruel, but because on his sets, the rule was simple. If you don't earn it, you don't get it. Strangely, the man who had once kept Scott a secret was now being almost too fair with him, refusing to give him an inch, even privately. Eventually, Scott did land tiny roles in Flags of Our Fathers and Invictus. But it wasn't until he built momentum on his own, scoring roles in indie thrillers and slowly working his way into bigger films, that his confidence started to match his ambition. Only then did he finally embrace his father's last name. I finally thought, "Okay, this is ridiculous. If I'm doing this, I should carry the Eastwood name," he said in an interview. But by that time, he wasn't just Clint's kid playing actor. He was a working actor with a real resume. When The Longest Ride came out and fans started noticing how much he looked like his father, it felt like a sort of strange destiny unfolding. The name he wasn't allowed to use as a child had now become part of his own rising success story. Just as Scott's career was beginning to take off, and he was finally carving out an identity independent of his famous father, life threw him a tragedy so shocking, so sudden, it could have broken anyone.
You meet girls all the time.
No, not like this.
Unlike the complicated dynamics of his family or the grueling auditions that had tested him for years, this was a loss entirely beyond control, a cruel twist of fate. Scott didn't speak about it publicly for years, but it left a scar far deeper than anything he had endured before. In 2014, Scott was dating a young model named Jewel Brangman. She was 26, full of life, and someone Scott had grown close to. Their relationship was private and quiet, away from the glare of Hollywood cameras. They had plans, moments, and dreams like any young couple, and in that way, she represented a normal life he had rarely known. Then, on September 7th, 2014, everything changed in an instant. Jewel was driving when she got into what seemed like a minor fender bender, the kind of accident most people walk away from with a bruise or a scratched bumper. But this small collision turned into an unthinkable tragedy. Her car was equipped with a Takata airbag, a device that had already become infamous for being dangerously defective. Instead of protecting her, the airbag exploded violently, sending a jagged piece of metal straight into her body. Jewel died on impact. The random, brutal nature of her death was almost impossible to process. Scott later described it as a nightmare in daylight. A device designed to save lives had taken hers instead. For someone who had spent much of his life learning to endure hardship and embrace resilience, this was something he could neither control nor prepare for. The pain was utterly private. He didn't speak publicly about it for 2 years, not because he didn't want to, but because the grief was too raw, too consuming. In interviews later, Scott described the period after Jewel's death as paralyzing. He felt frozen, unable to act, speak, or even breathe without thinking of her. The loss left him questioning life, fate, and the randomness of tragedy. But one of his heaviest regrets wasn't about fame or media attention. It was something far more human. He admitted that he never called Jewel's father immediately after the accident. He didn't know what to say, how to express his sorrow, or how to begin to apologize. "I still never called her father. I still haven't found the right words," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. Eventually, when he did make the call, Jewel's father received him with understanding and compassion. Scott's apology was heartfelt, though long delayed. Jewel's father said that Scott was genuinely shaken, remorseful, and unsure of how to handle the unimaginable situation. The conversation, though painful, offered a small measure of closure, a recognition of shared grief between two people connected by the sudden loss of someone they loved. The tragedy changed Scott. It shifted something inside him, adding a depth and vulnerability to the man who had already endured a lifetime of challenges. Up until then, his story had been framed around resilience, discipline, and determination, overcoming rejection, establishing an identity separate from a legendary father, and building his own career from scratch. But Jewel's death introduced a lesson in helplessness, a reminder that some events cannot be fought or controlled. It also reshaped the way the public saw him. Beyond the handsome face, the charming demeanor, and the athletic frame, Scott now carried a quiet, poignant sadness. It humanized him, showing that even someone seemingly invincible can face a loss that leaves them shattered. He never let it define him publicly in a sensational way. Instead, he carried it quietly, allowing it to inform his perspective on life, relationships, and the fragility of human existence. For Scott, this tragedy became a defining chapter of resilience, not the kind you see on a movie screen with epic battles or daring stunts, but the real, painful kind. Learning to continue living, continue loving, and continue pursuing your dreams even after life delivers an unimaginable blow. It tested him in ways no acting role ever could, forcing him to reconcile with grief, mortality, and vulnerability. And in doing so, it forged a deeper, more genuine version of Scott Eastwood, a man shaped not only by ambition and heritage, but by loss, love, and the courage to carry on. This loss wasn't a Hollywood story. It was life, brutal, sudden, and completely beyond anyone's control. And for Scott, it became part of a narrative far richer than fame or fortune could ever create, one of resilience, humility, and the kind of strength that can only be born through real human heartbreak. Scott's journey from a secret son to a Hollywood star is a testament to his own resilience. But it does leave you with a question. Can you ever really escape the shadow of a famous parent? Or do you just learn how to use it to push you forward? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of celebrities facing real-life challenges that the cameras don't capture.